Okay, so I want to talk a little bit as we're getting warmed up here before we get into some practical exercise. Talk a little bit about more like what is possible, and with the software. We started out last week with we looked at how we can make basic color corrections both in JPEG and RAW. We got introduced to the idea of layers, and we did even play a little bit with selection tools. But I want to continue the conversation about selection tools, what's possible with those selection tools, and then also look at some really neat functionality for just basic like retouching and blemish removal, which might be a lot more practical. So we're going to talk about both of those. So again, look basically what's possible, and we'll talk about both platforms. So we do have the ability to do some more finicky photo editing. You know, we have tools that make it really easy for us to go in and do things like take a little bit of lint off of fabric. We can actually do blemish removal as well, and we're going to look at some tools for that. Both of them this is available in both Lightroom and Photoshop, but again, Photoshop is much more powerful. Lightroom has a very basic tool for this. Photoshop has a number of tools, and there's a lot more power and flexibility. We have, it's not just one tool, but you know, there's four, actually more than four, but four standard tools we use for that. Beyond that, we can do more than just like a little bit of retouch and blemish removal. We actually have the ability to restore photographs. I'm going to show you an example of that here in just a moment. So once we understand these tools, because Photoshop is such a powerful program, we can literally restore damaged photographs. We can replace areas of photographs. So photographs, you know, historic photographs, they have creases. They may be torn. They maybe have pieces missing. We can actually bring those back to life. Not as if they were shot yesterday, but we can clean them up a great deal. And then of course, beyond that, like this is like, you know, probably more where we're going to be at most of the time. Like, you know, we're going to be color correcting images. We're going to be, you know, cropping images, which I don't think we talked about cropping images yet.
No, really, no.
How did we not talk about cropping images yet? We'll get there. It's going to happen. You know, we're gonna color correct images. We're gonna crop images. We might do some basic, you know, blemish removal. We might do sky replacement, and then getting into some heavier edits using more and more layers. But then we can actually do things where we are going. You know, I mean, last week we looked at sky replacement, but there are photographers and artists that are doing things with Photoshop that essentially they are creating completely new artistic images. It is now artwork. It's not just, it's now an illustration. It is no longer a photograph. So they are actually like, you know, going far beyond what, you know, certainly anything that can be done in a camera. And I want to show you guys what that looks like. So some of our examples here, this would be an example of like some images where, and we're going to actually walk through some examples and play with some files today to help you guys out with this. But, you know, we can, as you can see here, clean up stray hairs around the outside. You know, these images that we see in magazines, they've been heavily edited. We can retouch the skin. We can retouch makeup. We can remove lines from underneath eyes. There's all kinds of things you can do. You can see here how on the neck, there's actually been, you know, just like the folds of the skin have been removed and smoothed out. Now, you don't need to do something like this, but if any of you guys get into like senior portraiture, like some basic blemish removal is a good idea. A little bit of cleanup. You want to make people, now we're not going to go this far, most likely, but you do want to create an image that is going to, you know, be something that they're going to be happy with and proud of and want to share around to lots of different people. So there's these tools can give us the ability to do things like that. You know, it could be simpler, like some of the more complex, like actual removal of lines and whatnot. And then we can get into things like restoration projects, where we actually have tears and scratches and parts of the image that are completely gone. And with practice, it's not necessarily easy. Some areas of this particular project, Nicole did this, are actually quite complex, because you're actually, in some ways, completely repainting. And when we talk about restoration, you are truly restoring. And there's all kinds of techniques that you can use to do this, and for some of these more complicated things that you learn over time if you put some time into it, like this eye here, to actually bring that eye back. That's a pretty complex thing. And what I call that when I'm teaching that kind of technique is like, I teach people to lie, cheat, and steal. That's what we call it, lie, cheat, and steal. And I say that jokingly, but at the same time, truly, like, one of the techniques for doing restoration work like this is to actually borrow information from other photographs. So it's like, it's possible for a photograph like this that you could actually copy one eye and use it to repair the other eye. But you could also, like, one of my favorite examples, I had a student who was doing a restoration project in a class and had a photograph of her mother or grandmother on her wedding day. And the photograph was completely like overexposed, like big time overexposed. And we talked about this morning what it looks like when you overexpose an image, you blow out your highlights. Well, a wedding dress is white. So here, her mother's wedding dress, this beautiful ornate wedding dress, and everything is blown out. There's absolutely zero detail. It looks like she's just like wearing like a sheet. Okay. But when she decided that she wanted to restore this photograph, she was talking about how, she could fix it. And then during the course of the conversation, she just offhand mentions that she has the dress.
Oh.
I said, well, if you have the dress, we could take a photograph of the dress and we can lay the texture of the actual dress into the photograph that your mother is in. And we were able to completely restore the image, even with the exposure. But she has the photograph of her mother on her wedding day. We have the dress. We can now really meaningfully repair that image. And she was just over the moon, So that kind of creativity and problem solving. So that's what I mean by lie, cheat, and steal. We can steal pixels from other images, because you saw last week, we can take one image, we can drag it into another image. We can use that for fun, silly applications like we did last week. We can have Darth Vader balloon races, or we can do something like more practical, like what we're talking about here. And then again, examples of where we are now bending the ideas of reality. This is actually a photographer that both Nicole and I greatly admire. Her name is Brooke Shaden. And she's truly an artist. I mean, she imagines these things and these scenes, and then will shoot photographs, but then layer additional photographs over the original image and create, very interesting illustrations where it's like, obviously nothing that you would see or be able to create in reality without editing software like this. One of the cool things about Brooke Shaden, if you are interested or just curious, even if you're not like, I want to edit photographs like that one day, but even if you're just curious and just want to see, Brooke Shaden is really cool. One of the things I love about her is that she's very open about her process and she shares a lot. So she talks about her work, she talks about her creative process and some of the videos that she has out there. And then she will even record, it's like a time-lapse edit. It's not like, she sits there and you get to watch like hours and hours and hours of her editing, but she will record her editing process and then she will share it out in time-lapse. So you can see all the layers popping up, changing, playing with opacity, she's painting. And so it's basically, you see the raw image go to this beautiful illustration that she imagined over the course of several minutes, as opposed to the several hours that it truly took her. But she's really wonderful about sharing her process with people.
I've seen some of her photographs that she shared. She actually has like 50 to 75 layers in one photo, because she is taking so many different elements. Like the center photo with the books, she has, I would imagine, just based on her process that I've seen in her videos, she has probably tossed those books up like 40 different times, and then takes like 10 of those photos individually, elements from each one, and puts them into this photo. And then she's also got, like, this is her climbing on that ladder. All of her photos are self-portraits, basically. So she has a timer, or she's holding a,
especially her really early work.
yes, especially her really early work. But, and then like the books in the trees, like she'll just take pictures of bookshelves, whether it's in a store or her own bookshelf. So those might be 4 separate pictures right there. So that's 4 separate layers just of that, plus all of the layers of the books, plus the layer of the background, plus the layer of her, plus the layer of the dress. Like there are so many, and then that's not including the masking layers that she has. So her file sizes are tremendously big. And then once she's all done, she merges everything together. So it's a smaller file.
Well, and another thing too is she layers in a lot of texture. So she'll just put like a layer that's just like, there's not any tangible object in the photograph. It's just texture. And then she lays that texture into the photograph. Like this wall right here, she probably completely created that wall just with texture and playing with Photoshop. So, and like I said, we like to talk about her because she is so open and like shares so much of her work and her process.
What is her name?
Brooke Shaden.
Could you spell that?
Brooke. So traditional spelling of Brooke, and then Shaden.
Hey, I had it right.
There you go. So she's a great one to follow. She's really fantastic. So. All right, so now let's start to look at this. Now, does everyone have files? Have we gotten to that point? Because I was kind of stalling.
No, David,
All right, do you have the drive still?
No, I.
Oh, all right. Because we're now going to start looking at some of the tools that we use to, to actually do these things. At least the base level, the basics of these tools. Obviously, we're not going to get to doing something like this in class today, but we're going to talk about the foundations. Like, last week we looked at layers. Obviously, layers is a big part of the foundation for how to do things like this. But in addition to that, we're going to talk about selections. So one of the things I want to have you guys do, so if you haven't done so already, get your computer started up. And we have this file for you in a couple of different places. For those of you who we had the drive come around, it's in the workshop files, and you're actually going to need multiple folders. So there's a folder in there. All right, so we're going to walk through. We showed you guys, one of our basic selection tools last week. We are going to actually work through playing with this file with you guys. And what we're going to do is we are going to go by playing with the different files that we have, we are going to go from this, which is the start file, to something, resembling this over here. This file, the start file, is all one layer. And this file is great for learning how to use a number of different selections and ways, not only the selection tools, how they function, but how we manipulate our selections once we've created them. So we're going to go through, I'm going to go one at a time. We're going to bounce back and forth through these. And they're pretty simple in some cases. Really, foundationally, the tools are pretty basic in function. So the marquee selections are our simplest form of selection tools. So I'm going to go back over to Photoshop here. And our marquee selections are right here underneath the selection tool, or I'm sorry, the move tool. So you should have an elliptical and a rectangular marquee tool. They're nested with one another. By default, the rectangular marquee tool is at the top of the hierarchy. Now, these are really simple tool-based selections. So when I say tool-based, it's like I click, I drag, the software is going to make a selection based on what I choose. And I know we're still getting the files opened up. So I'll stop before I make a meaningful selection. But in the terms of the rectangular marquee, it's the simplest one. I literally, this is the easiest one to understand. I click and I've created now a top corner. I drag, I let go, and when I reach that bottom corner, and now I have the marching ants selection dialog that indicates what area of the image is selected. The rectangular marquee selection can be useful, but in this particular case, we don't actually need to use it. But I wanted to show you how it functions. And again, it's one of the easiest ones that we have. Now, there is a piece in here that we can select meaningfully with the elliptical marquee tool. Okay, so go ahead and now underneath the rectangular marquee, we have the elliptical marquee. Go ahead and grab that. Both showing you up here. Remember, if you click and hold over the top tool in the hierarchy in the tools panel, it will show you the tools that are beneath. Anybody having trouble finding it?
So which one are you gonna use, lasso?
No, the elliptical marquee is what we're looking for. We're gonna get to the lasso, but that's a little bit more complicated.
Choose the icon just above.
Look and hold, and then
Oh.
there you go. Because remember, there's
Sorry.
lots of, no, it's okay. Remember, there's lots and lots of tools. What we're seeing here is just the top of the hierarchy. There's many more tools that are nested inside, all right? So now what we're gonna do, and I don't want you to sweat making it perfect, because we're gonna show you two things here. I want you with the elliptical marquee, and when you start to draw with the elliptical marquee, this selection will go away, and that's just fine. I want you to try to select this, I'm calling it a book label, as best you can. Don't get frustrated and don't try 37 times, because I'm going to show you a trick that makes it easier. Okay, so just as close as you can. And it's all right if it's not perfect.
And if you don't get it and you're way off, you can hit Control D as in dog to deselect. Like I was totally way off on how I did that, so.
Well, and actually, one of the things that I like to tell people is don't try to make it perfect and get frustrated. Like she didn't need to do that, because even if you're close, even if you're not close, we have the ability, we transformed pixels last week. You can transform a selection, which makes this a whole lot easier. So she's got a selection and she's pretty darn close. It's not bad. If she goes to the select command menu and then goes to the bottom transform selection. There you go, right there. Now the selection has the handles just like when we were transforming the pixels, but instead of transforming the pixels, it's not going to stretch the pixels, manipulate the pixels. It's going to manipulate the selection itself. So now she can just grab the handles and move it around until she feels like she has it centered. She can widen it. Oh, this is where that shift constrain thing comes in. So it used to be that you had to hold shift to constrain, but now it's default you don't have to hold shift to constrain. So if you don't want to constrain, you have to hold shift. So if you want to stretch it, you actually have to hold the shift key to stretch it, which is tricky. I really like the old way. I do not like this shift by, or constrained by default. Okay, now don't do anything with it just yet. I want to show you there's a couple of different options that you have on what you can do with that information once you have actually selected it. Remember, you have to hold shift if you want to stretch it. And we're just playing, so don't worry about it being perfect. Okay, once you feel like you have the selection that you want, you just hit enter on the keyboard, it executes that transformation, and you're now just back to the selection dialog. Now be careful, don't do anything just yet, because I want to show you guys, remember we talked about non-destructive editing. There are different ways to work with this information, and we want to do this in such a way that it gives us the greatest amount of flexibility. Now, if you play around, you can find that if you grab your selection tool or move tool, you can simply move those pixels from one area of the photograph to another. And I'm gonna have, I don't want you guys to do this, but I'm gonna have Nicole do it so you guys can see why it's bad. So she's now moved it. You can see here that it's just showing whatever the background color was behind that. But this is all one layer. And what she's done here, not really a big deal just yet. But if she actually moved it over the book, if she moves it over the book, and then lets go and deselects, and then decides that she's got it in the wrong place, it's too late. It's already in that position. She would have to, like say she saved, came back to it, she would have to select it again, and then if she moved it, all the pixels that were behind where it is are now gone. They're destroyed. So she's going to undo.
Oh, I was gonna show.
If you want, go for it. Yeah, because it will, the impact visually is negative.
Right,
So
so I'm just gonna,
good practice.
there we go.
And now she,
Now I move that. Now I've cut out, you can see down here, I've also cut out some of the book. And even if I made that oval shape as close as possible, I'm still removing, because remember, this pattern here was all the way down. I would still be removing the book itself with the oval.
so we do, there are destructive ways to edit and there are non-destructive ways to edit. So she's going to undo. Yay! And now she's going to do it the right way. And that is to copy and paste. So really simple at this point, you can either go to the edit menu and choose copy. And then you can see here, nothing has really changed, but if she clicks on paste, the selection goes away, but note what happened in the layers panel. We now have a new layer called layer 1. And if you look closely at the thumbnail, you can see that there is actually that book label in layer 1. Now she can grab the move tool and she can move the book label over into the book. But because it's in its own independent layer, it is non-destructive. The original information, if you look at the thumbnail, is intact. Nothing has changed. If she decides that she didn't get it in the right spot, she can move it. She can nudge it around all day long. She can do whatever she wants. And that information is independent of the background layer. You can copy and paste these objects as many times as you want. In fact, what I'd like you to do now, if you look up here, we're actually going to copy that globe 3 times. So why don't we, everybody select the globe This is a good opportunity to talk, to actually show like different ways of selecting. You can copy any of these items and paste them as many times as you'd like. So same process. I want you guys to try to select the globe. To make it a little easier for yourself, remember Control plus zooms, Control minus zooms out. So you may want to zoom in on the globe a little bit more tightly. Oh, and actually something weird's gonna happen here. So we're about to make a mistake, and that's okay.
Okay.
What?
Oh, you said we're about to make.
No, it's okay. I want this to happen.
Mistake.
This is that's okay. You are making a mistake, and that's fine. Because it's a common mistake and it happens, and when it happens, you're gonna be like, what does that mean? So it's good that we see this. So we're just gonna let Nicole do this, even though she already knows that she messed up slightly. It's not a big deal. Totally fixable, easy to fix.
But you still want us to copy it 3 times?
Yes, copy, well, just do it once for now.
The globe we're doing once?
3 times, eventually.
Oh, yeah.
But we're gonna do this in steps because a lot of you are gonna make the same mistake that Nicole just made. Okay, so Nicole went to copy and it says could not complete the copy command because the selected area is empty. This is a super common error message, but it's actually not the computer making an error, it's operator error. It's saying that because she's on layer 1, and where she's selected on layer 1, there's nothing but transparency. There is no pixel information. So no big deal. She's just gonna click OK, and she's gonna click on the background layer where that pixel information actually lives. And now she's gonna copy and paste.
No, I've got my layer.
And now she has the globe layer as layer 2, and now she can move it up at the top. And you don't have to make it look exactly like that sample image, that original image. Or sorry, what not the original image, but what they're calling their end image. And then what they did, if you look at it, just so you know, no big deal, they inverted the color, which is, we'll show you how to do that, to invert the color. So to invert the color, she has that layer selected. Actually, I should wait to see. Let's get everybody successfully on the same page. Okay, actually, so if you end up with a layer, an additional layer that you don't want, like Carol has done. So if I end up with a whole bunch of these book label layers and I don't want them, it's really easy to get rid of them. All you gotta do, the universal sign for go away, of course, is the trash can. So I'm just gonna hit the trash can and it'll ask me if I want to delete that layer. And then again, delete that layer, tell it, go away, and now it's gone. So inverting the color, so if you have, make sure you have layer 2 selected. Wherever layer 2 is, that's your globe layer. You're gonna go to image, adjustments, and invert. And that's how you invert the color of that. So just flops it.
Every time I pasted it, it came up a different layer. Is that what?
Yep, it should be. That's good because it's all independent information. We can edit that really easily, okay? And then what it did, and you guys can do this if you'd like, you don't have to, but you can make this you make it your own thing. It doesn't have to look like this. But in addition to inverting it, they also used the transform command independently on 2 of the layers to make 2 of the globes larger. It made them successively larger. So you can do that if you'd like. You don't have to, just play around.
Do we want to mention renaming layers since there's
Yeah,
3
that's
globes?
actually, so that's Nicole just brought up a really important part. So our file is already getting kind of complex. So imagine now you're working on a file as complex as what Brooke Shaden does, and you've got 50, 70 layers, and you literally will get to some point in that process that you're like, I don't even know where anything is anymore. I know that I had this thing in here somewhere, but I've not organized my layers and named my layers, so I don't know how to get there. So you actually can really easily organize and keep track of your layers. One of the ways that you can do it is to actually just double click on the layer, on the layer name, and you can name that layer. So Nicole is naming the layers.
And if you don't know which is which, so I didn't know which globe layer belonged to which globe. So I just picked a layer, you know, it was layer 4, and I hit that eye icon, and that what I have as a medium globe disappeared. So I know that's what that is. So I made that reappear. That's my medium globe. Layer 3, is that my small one or is that my big one? Click the eye, toggle it. Okay, that's my large globe. Bring that back. Double click on the layer name. Name it whatever I want, large globe, LG, whatever works for you. Hit enter. And then by default, layer 2 should be my small globe, but you can double check, toggle the visibility. That's what it is. Rename, and there we go. Now we know which layer belongs to which globe, which will be easier if you start doing fancier things and edits and whatnot. And that way you're not wasting time trying to figure out what's what.
Okay, now another thing that you can do, so depending on the complexity of the project, you don't have to do this, you can do this. So we're gonna end up with this file, we could end up with a lot of layers. So Nicole might decide that she doesn't need to actually be able to see all 3 of her globe layers in the layer panel. You can also create like layer groups. So there's like a little folder, and there's a couple of easy ways to do that. So she can select all 3 of those layers, and then there's a folder icon in the layers panel. And if she selects that folder icon, it will actually put all of those layers into a folder. And now you can see her layers panel is cleaner, so it's easier for her. She can toggle it back and forth. She can collapse it. There, she can call, it says group 1 now. She can rename that globes. And so if she ends up with a lot of layers, it's now organized. And if she moves that, she moves it all together. So what was that again? It's a little, so she selected all 3 layers.
So to select all 3,
And
you
then
hold the
there's a
shift key
folder
down when you click on each one. If they're all in a row. Now, let's say we had a layer in between them, you would have to do control and then click on the ones that you want to group. And then once you have them all selected, go down to the bottom of your layers panel where you see like FX, a little camera box, whatever, a circle, and then you have a folder, and then we'll create a
You
new
can do it that
group.
way as well, but you don't even have to do that. Okay, so one of the things about like, what some of you guys are finding this, if you double click on the layer name, you can rename the layer. But if you double click someplace else in the layer, it brings up the properties and effects for that layer. So you gotta be careful where you actually double click. So like, let's say I double click on this layer out here. Now it brings out a layer style, okay? As opposed to if I double click here on the name, I get the name. So that's why some of you guys are ending up with that layer style menu, which is how you can add a really cool,
You can do a lot of cool stuff there.
a drop shadow. But you don't need to do that. Okay, so let's I think we're all on the same page. Has everyone got their globe layers? And everybody can look different. It's okay.
How does the glow, like this one ended up in front?
That has to do with the order of the layers. So basically, now remember this analogy, like the layers of transparency. The one that is on top obscures what's below. So if Nicole wants, let's say she wants the smallest globe to actually be visible and, above this middle globe. But if you look here, she's got the medium-sized globe is actually obscuring the other two globes. If she wants the smallest globe to be visible and obscure what's below, she actually has to physically move it up in the hierarchy. It's at the bottom, she's going to move it up to the top, and it totally changes what the image looks like. So the order in which you have your layers has a great deal of impact on the overall appearance of the image. All right?